Hi, Matthew here and welcome to another video. In today's video we are going to take a broad look at HMOs, discuss some of the pros and cons that may specifically apply to a new landlord looking at a HMO as a viable first investment option. I also have a great example of a HMO to show you. It's in my local area and it single-handedly answers a lot of the questions that anyone might have regarding the successful operation and running of a HMO. If you are new to the channel, then do please subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any future videos. Right, let's get into the world of HMOs and let's assume that someone is considering a pre-existing HMO property as an investment. As a new landlord, would it be wise to consider a HMO as a sensible first step into the world of buy-to-let? It is certainly an effective way to amass a portfolio with one single roll of the dice. A lot of people may recommend that for a first property, a bog-standard residential single occupancy would be the way to go. Ease yourself into the industry, which is a valid point. Let's take a look at a few HMO facts so we can at least have an informed opinion. It can be more difficult to secure finance on a HMO, especially for a new landlord. Be sure to shop around with independent mortgage providers and ensure the deals that you have access to are competitive and keep the project viable. HMOs are far more popular than they used to be, so there are far more providers in the market, which has improved competition on the mortgage products available. So financing is becoming far less of a barrier. There are of course far fewer pre-existing HMOs on the market for sale as opposed to a bog standard residential buy-to-let alternative. In theory, any property can be a standard buy-to-let, whereas not every property is suitable to be a HMO. It may therefore take some time to find the right HMO at the right price with the right number of rooms in a good location that's got strong demand. A HMO will generally see less capital growth throughout its life. Once converted, its resale target market is reduced to existing landlords and anyone willing to take the property on and undo the conversion. So are HMOs as profitable as all the property masterclass seminars would have us believe? The first thing to be mindful of, especially when it comes to HMOs, is the misleading references to yields. You will always find in any marketing spiel the yield will be referred to as a gross figure. That headline figure is quite simply marketing to draw us in. They often look very impressive, but they are quite misleading. Of course, the yield on a HMO is going to seem impressive when referred to in gross terms. You have all that rental income and zero fixed cost outgoings taken into consideration. HMOs have a lot of outgoings, especially compared to a single occupancy standard buy-to-let property. Do not pay attention to the gross yield. Now, some other factors weighing down on the profitability of a HMO. As a general rule of thumb, the more lettable rooms you have, the more profitable you will be. Yes, it sounds obvious, but the reality is that the more lettable rooms you have, of course the costs increase, but they do not increase in direct proportion to the number of rooms that you have. A 6-room HMO does not have twice the cost of a 3-room. It is widely believed that in order for a HMO to be truly worthwhile, at least 5 rentable rooms are needed. Clearly, it all comes down to the numbers, so be thorough and seek the advice and guidance from those with experience so that you don't miss anything. In theory, a single occupancy buy-to-let property should be easier for a first timer. There are slightly fewer rules and regulations to adhere to, and the lower turnover of tenants should result in less maintenance and less refurbishment. However, I don't think this should put anyone off taking on a HMO. So let's just consider those 2 points. The rules and regulations. You will be operating as a professional buy-to-let business and you will want to conduct yourself by the letter of the law. So you'll want to familiarise yourself with the rules anyway. From the outset, you'll of course ensure that your property meets all the rules and regulations. And then all you'll need to do is ensure that from one tenant to the next, nothing deviates. And then the HMO life becomes the norm to you. Now, with regard to turnover of tenant, yes, there will be a higher turnover of tenant. The majority of people in an ideal scenario do not want to share accommodation with strangers. It may suit someone's circumstances at a particular point in their life, but that will often be short-lived and will result in tenants vacating more often than a single occupancy buy-to-let property. The knock-on effect of high turnover of tenant is that there generally will be some cost each time. Maybe a little redecorating is needed, a piece of furniture might need to be replaced, the carpet may need a clean. And because the tenant knew this was potentially going to be a short-term thing, they may not have been quite so respectful to the property. But of course you can't mitigate this high turnover of tenant and the additional risks that this may bring. You'll need some good procedures in place, such as thorough inventory checks. As far as managing HMO tenants and the day-to-day interactions with them, it's no different to any other property. You're dealing with people and a certain set of circumstances. In a lot of respects, there are benefits to having all your tenants under one roof. They are living under the same set of circumstances. In regard to maintenance costs, we always hear how HMOs are prone to more maintenance. It's not quite so simple as that though. Yes, if you consider how often a handyman may have to go out to that one particular property, it may seem intense, but that's not the way to look at it. Consider you have a 6-bedroom, 6-tenant HMO versus 6 individual single occupancy properties. It's not the property that creates the work, it's the number of tenants you have. Tenants create wear and tear, tenants break stuff. At least with a HMO, all of that is contained under one roof. There is, for example, only one heating system that an engineer will need to be familiar with instead of 6 individual systems. There is only one oven in the kitchen. Yes, it may be getting used 6 times as much, but it's still under one roof. And there is only one fence in the garden for a storm to blow down. I personally believe the correct way to look at a HMO is single individual lets. As I just said, generally speaking, it's tenants that create workload for landlords. Each occupant or tenant of a HMO will present an individual set of needs and circumstances, just as tenants would in single occupancy properties. It is clear to see how there's an argument for and against HMOs purely on the perceived workload. However, with the right mindset, this simply is a consideration and not an obstacle. So let's now touch on what is generally the number one reason why people consider HMOs: perceived profit. There is no doubt that a well-managed, well-financed, well-maintained HMO can be and should be more profitable than a bog-standard single-occupancy buy-to-let property. If you can become a buy-to-let landlord running an efficient HMO business in the most business-like way possible, then you should get a better return on your money. Now, I did mention at the beginning I'd got a good example for you of a HMO. Okay, so here we have the example HMO I was referring to earlier, located on the outskirts of Derby city centre, currently on the market at $330,000. It was recently reduced to that price, so clearly it hasn't been selling. 6 bedrooms, fully tenanted at the moment. 2 of those are students, I believe. So depending on the university situation, whether they will remain reliable is only time will tell, really. Let's assume that will be the case. So total income at the moment, fully tenanted, is $37,500, and quoting a gross yield of 11.36%. Again, we should probably ignore the gross yield because that doesn't factor in any of the outgoings at this point in time. So if we take a look, as you can see, very nicely finished inside, looks high quality, nice communal kitchen area. Very good ensuite facilities. And there it is. Seems to be well thought out. Like I say, good communal area. All the bedrooms are en suite, with the studio apartment having its own little kitchenette and ensuite facilities. This is what I found particularly interesting, that they've actually disclosed their incomings and outgoings. So as we can see, the price per room, we'll assume that they're achieving the maximum at this point in time, so that is the annual income. And as for the outgoings, a couple missing from there, I think. Insurance, TV license, things like that. However, there is a management fee in there, which if you were deciding to manage the property yourself, you could of course remove that straight away and make a reasonable saving each year. However, you do need to decide whether your time is worth more than the £312.50 per month. If so, then you may wish to keep the property managed on your behalf. So my best estimations for a more accurate yield on this particular property, when factoring in all the outgoings, so the insurance, TV license, etc., we'll leave the management fee in. I believe a more accurate yield is about 8.5%. However, I would still consider that to be a gross yield because that doesn't take into consideration any financing costs. So all in all, I felt this was a reasonable example of a HMO. It was nice that they disclosed the incomings and outgoings. The fact that this was refurbished back in 2020 suggests to me that it was purchased with the intention of doing the conversion and then selling as a going concern. So this could make an ideal project or investment opportunity for a new landlord who wanted to get into the HMO market and didn't have to do the conversion of their own. And with that price having been reduced recently, there may be further negotiation there. Of course, the less you pay, the greater your yield will be. Now, with any buy-to-let, and particularly a HMO, because of the high turnover of tenant, you do need to factor in some vacant periods. They may only be a week here or a few days there in between tenants, but maybe a good rule of thumb would be a vacant week per room per year. You will remember that at the beginning we made a few assumptions that a new landlord was looking to purchase a pre-existing HMO. Now, as with any property purchase, you do need to always ask yourself, why are they selling? More often than not, this will be very obvious and completely legit. However, with a HMO, I would always want to err on the side of caution and consider a worst case scenario. Are they selling because the numbers simply don't stack up? There isn't enough demand in the area? Are they finding that the workload is too much? Or was the sale of the HMO the intention all along, to buy a property, do the conversion and then sell a viable HMO business? Anyway, hopefully some of those points have given us something to think about and maybe shed some light on how there are various different mindsets anyone can have when considering a HMO, and particularly a new landlord. Thanks for watching, and as ever, if you could like and subscribe, that would be much appreciated, and I will be back again soon with another video. Thank you.